main joke might only be a darts match, but us British has still got to try and hammer these Germans.
What for?
Because they're the bastards that bombed me granny.
This is the story of Auf Wiedersehen Pet, the drama about a gang of British workmen abroad whose 16 million viewers took to their hearts.
They were just fantastically drawn characters, you know, beautifully written.
We loved letting these wild and wonderful personalities into our living rooms.
They're ordinary people doing just really ordinary things, like, oh, scratching his answer. Everyone does that, don't they?
And the show ran for 4 series, taking the characters from Tyneside to Spain, the East Midlands to Arizona, and from ITV to the BBC.
Brits Abroad. That was the first time it ever been done to me.
Everything just gelled. Location, casting particularly, the theme tune. Wonderful.
The 4th series aired in 2004, but the story starts over 20 years earlier, when writers Dick Clement and Ian La Frenais got hold of the idea of Brickies Abroad. Regarded as local heroes in Newcastle, Clement and La Frenais had proved with the Likely Lads that they could create working-class characters who weren't caricatures.
Cigarette, Audrey?
No, thanks.
Why don't you come out with me? Why don't you come out with me?
Large one, sir? Mind your own business, really.
Aided and abetted by the brilliant Ronnie Barker, Clement and La Frenais could also find comedy and unlikely settings, like Slade Prison in Porridge.
Oh, prisoners 1, system 0.
You can make a direct connection between Porridge and Auf Wiedersehen, you know, where prison is obviously, again, a confined environment. The big difference was that Porridge was an out-and-out comedy series. And we never saw Auf Wiedersehen as a comedy series per se. We regarded it as a drama series in the 60-minute format.
But the original inspiration for Auf Wiedersehen Pet didn't come from the eventual writers, but from a BBC documentary filmmaker from Teesside, Frank Rodham.
I've always wanted to, you know, shed light on common experience. Actually, that's a quote from Trotsky, you know, but at the same time, it was also something that within the BBC that we felt, and also the class I come from, industrial working class from the north of England, I wanted our voices to be heard correctly.
We may also have Frank Rodham to thank for much of what modern television is up to, as he was the creator of the 1970s docusoap, The Family.
Now you stop being cheeky.
Auf Wiedersehen Pet was very much a television drama of its time. Life in Britain during the early Thatcher years was hard, and with unemployment running at over 2 million, there was a flexible labour market. If you wanted labour, you had to be flexible, and if necessary, be prepared to get on your bike.
I'd normally go back to the northeast and go drinking with my pals. They'd all disappeared. And what had happened is that they'd gone off to work in Germany. And I thought, wow, that's kind of wild. And then next time I saw them, they'd come back and they started telling me about their experiences.
Intrigued, Frank followed his Bricky pal Mick Connell to Germany and soon had an idea for a one-off drama. But it would have to be put on hold as he was about to direct a feature film. So it was Guten Tag to Quadrophenia and Auf Wiedersehen to Auf Wiedersehen.
What did you mean? What you doing here then?
But the Geordie bricklayers in Germany were never far from his thoughts. So after finishing Quadrophenia, Hodds replaced Mods, and Frank goes to Hollywood.
Yeah, you?
To get things moving. One of the movers and shakers he met there was Alan McKeown, who'd been a hairdresser to the stars before he set up a Los Angeles-based production company with Dick Clement and Ian La Frenais. The company, Wits End, masterminded ITV's post-war drama Shine on Harvey Moon, and McKeown & Co. were always on the lookout for new ideas.
I met with him, and he gave me one of those ideas that you just dream about hearing. Geordie bricklayers working in Germany. One line. And I just loved it.
We immediately kind of thought that sounded right up our street. Just instinctively we felt that was something we could do.
Ian was just besotted by the idea and said, look, I want to go and write this. I want to go home now and write it this afternoon.
And within half an hour, Ian came back to us and said, Auf Wiedersehen Pet. Just the greatest title.
It was now Alan McKeown's job to sell Auf Wiedersehen Pet as a one-off drama, but Central TV liked the idea so much they asked for a series of 13 episodes by Thursday. That put Frank out of the picture because of film commitments, so it was left to Frank's pal Mick Connell to accompany Witzend on another fact-finding trip to Germany in his role as technical advisor.
We got to Dusseldorf Airport and Mick was arrested because of some misdemeanors he'd committed when he was a bricklayer in Germany.
Gave it great authenticity, though, didn't it? Oh, yeah. Being arrested. You immediately thought, there must be a series here if this guy's been arrested.
A technical advisor.
So with Mick Connell's local knowledge, McEwan's media clout, and Clement and Frenais' scripting experience, the Bonnie lads were on the road.
Well, we started with the three Geordies. We started with the three guys leaving Newcastle together. And, you know, Neville was very much the one who was Mr. Responsible and Mr. Worry. I mean, he was always worried about money and who's paying for this.
Dearest Brenda, well, here I am in Holland, but it could almost be England, except we're driving on the wrong side of the road. When we read the scripts, all the Geordie Mafia were very keen to get into these scripts because we all hero worship Dick and Ian from the Likely Lads and things like that. And when we read them, the obvious part that everybody wanted was Oz. You know, everybody wanted to be Oz. And my wife said straight away when she read it, "You're not Oz. Go for Neville."
Before settling on acting as a career, Kevin Whately had played it safe training as an accountant. He started with parts in cop shows like Juliet Bravo and Shoestring.
Great, thanks.
And Real Madrid had a home game on Sunday.
No thanks, I'll be at the bullfight.
Kevin also appeared in several BBC plays, including The Dig, before getting to use his own accent as Neville in Auf Wiedersehen, Pet.
Dennis, man, I'm not a carpenter, man. Did you take woodwork at school? Well, yes, but I'm making a carpenter.
The second of the Geordie Mafia to clock in was Tim Healy, a former welder and paratrooper who had founded the Live Theatre Company with Kevin Whately's wife, Madeline Newton, and Jimmy Nail's sister, Val McLean. Healy's television debut was as a bingo caller in Coronation Street, but he came to the attention of Clement and Frenais when he tackled his first proper television drama role opposite Dennis Waterman in the World Cup A Captain's Tale.
Hey, did you hear what he called me? Called me a bastard. I don't give a bugger for Sir Thomas Lipton or his bloody trophy. I don't give a bugger for England. But I care for us, right? West Auckland.
They were all miners. So it was a great story anyway. Dick and Ian saw me in that, and then I got offered the part of Dennis in Auf Wiedersehen.
Dennis was the one who was kind of Mr. Solid that everybody looked to for answers.
The rest of the lads want him to become this head figure. So he takes it on board, you know, because he hasn't got any choice, really.
This group needs someone of your eloquence to lead them.
Harry.
Yes, Ralph. What about this?
But the part everybody was after was Leonard Jeffrey Osborne, known forevermore as Oz.
What do they call her?
Val McLean's brother, a builder with no serious acting aspirations, went along for an extra part and found himself in the running for Oz, even though his main performing experience was cavorting about the stage in the pub rock band The King Crabs.
He walked in and he was Oz. He just was. And that doesn't happen with casting very often. It gives you chills when it happens.
They looked at him and asked him if he'd done any theatre. He said, no, here at the theatre. Have you done any acting? No, I've never acted before, like, you know. Why are you here? I said, well, I've just come along and said you wanted extras.
I can remember saying to Martin McKean, well, what's this bloke, you know, done? He said, well, he was in a pop group called The Crabs, and he just got out of prison. So I said, he sounds perfect. So we brought this bloke down. He was sitting in the reception, and I can remember Hazel, my secretary, saying to me, there's a horrible man in the reception. I said, oh, that'd be that bloke who they think might play Oz. And she said, well, it's just horrible. So anyway, they brought in this bloke. It was Jimmy Nail. And he couldn't have been more charming.
Ah, bollocks, man!
He was one of those fantastic creations like Alf Garnett or Yosser Hughes or whatever. Just a huge comedy character that could say and do absolutely anything.
Thank you, friend.
And don't you say to you too, pal.
Dennis and Neville would meet more memorable characters on their journey with Oz. The job of making Brummy Barry likeable as well as boring was given to Timothy Spall, who was proving to be the most versatile actor of the troupe. He'd worked before with director Roger Bamford in the Brill Cream Boys and appeared in Frank Rodham's Quadrophenia. As Wayne, Ladies' Man, Diamond Geezer and Ronnie Wood look-alike, Gary Holton had also been in Quadrophenia, but he was best known as lead singer of the Heavy Metal Kids. Another unusual piece of casting was Pat Roach, a former champion wrestler who'd appeared in A Clockwork Orange, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and had even auditioned for Darth Vader in Star Wars. The body, not the voice. He took the part of Brian Busbridge, better known as Bomber.
Your name's Bomber.
Which is the best hood, Bomber?
Oh, I take that. The other one's got all the turds in it. We calls it the Casbah.
Chris Fairbank was an experienced character actor, but he almost didn't get into the gang hut at all. Clement and Frenais wrote the part of Moxie for a musician friend of theirs, but he chickened out and Fairbank stepped in.
Fella told me to come to up B. You sure he said up B?
Oh, aye, yeah.
I don't think so. Must be some mistake. Try the next one along.
I was recovering from being fired from the Royal Shakespeare Company.
Is it okay, like, if I leave my gear here for a minute? What?
The interview for Moxie was the straw that I clung to desperately, because I really thought I was never going to work again, having had a somewhat checkered career hitherto.
Moxie, again, was quite a peripheral character to start with and only got into the hut because he had a dartboard.
I haven't got any darts, though.
So now they gathered together the Magnificent Seven. Clement and Frenais were playing to their strengths, men in confinement, almost like a prison, or, since they were in Germany, a prisoner of war camp.
And where is Rover? When we did find out from Mick that they actually lived in huts.
Still like 17 by the look of things.
With German bosses, we said it's a prisoner of war camp.
England has had a problem. They always are.
If there was no Herr Grunwald, there wouldn't have been a series, because he held it all together.
Michael Sheard's long career in film and television had included most of the Nazi high command, and his speciality was Hitler. So there were few better suited to play German site manager or camp commandant, Herr Grunwald.
Grunwald was a German, yeah? And it is much, much easier to be strict if you are talking with a German accent.
Another thing marking Auf Wiedersehen Pet as a different kind of show was its refusal to dilute thick regional accents.
I think it was the first time that any producers or directors had the balls, really, to make these characters completely real, and the fact that all of their accents were exactly what their accents would be like, you know, without softening it.
Still floating doon, is it?
Floating doon? Well, what's that supposed to mean, then?
Ah, high in it doon, man. Cats and dogs. It's pissing down, isn't it?
Oh, at least that's English.
People were saying to me, I can't understand what anyone's saying. And the worst offender, actually, was Jimmy Nail.
I have to say, in the first series, his Geordie was so thick that people said to me, I can't always understand it. And I said, no, I can't either.
You can't eat supper and all, you know. Flattened her with a bomb and I wheel back on the Black Horse. Oh. Poor Sue's only lived out for a milk stout.
But it didn't really matter. It had a great authenticity.
Although writing regional dialogue was right up Clement and Frenais' street, under the pressure of 13 episodes, they realised they were in need of some professional help, in the form of comedy writer Stan Hay.
I don't know who suggested Stan, but he was great.
They got a bit overstretched in terms of the writing. Dick and Ian were also doing Water at the time, this film with Billy Connolly. And they were doing 13 episodes. You know, in those days, it was a big commission.
You can blame Alan McEwen, because Alan McEwen went up and suddenly said, I've got an order for 13 shows, which was sort of unprecedented.
And it wasn't only the writers who were under pressure. The actors were too, working for months and months for long hours in hot claustrophobic conditions, and there was no escape from the hut.
You only see the 7 guys in there, where you got 25 crew in there as well, so it was just exhausting.
When you got all the lights up in there, it was really claustrophobic and hot. So it was like an extra character, really. You really did feel that claustrophobia that the lads were going through.
We said, listen, when this series finishes, we're going to burn this hut down.
It's petrol! Hey, your bloody bike has been leaking petrol all over my home, you idiot.
So the actors were determined to see the back of it, and Stan Hay granted their wish in a memorably explosive finale.
It was one one heck of a moment, actually. I mean, they blew this fucking high, sky high. Bloody dangerous. I can just remember bits hitting me on the head and lots of burning wood.
It takes me back! It really takes me back!
All in all, we were very pleased to see it go and smog. It's what it deserved.
You were only supposed to blow the bloody doors off. The dramatic end meant a second series would have to find a new location and a fresh reason for the gang to get together again.
One of the real basic things you don't do in TV series is you don't burn the sofa. And because we thought we were so clever and so different, we decided to burn down the hut. When we could have stayed in the hut for years, it would have been great.
It wasn't our favourite way to end the series. We were a little surprised.
We wouldn't have chosen that.
We would not have chosen the way that happened.
We've lost everything. Money, the passports, tickets, clothes.
Bloody hell.
I thought it was too much of a downer, and after all, they'd worked that hard.
And lost all their savings and
Yeah.
pensions.
Yeah. No, I didn't find it satisfying.
There's a couple of the lads and all.
Hey, Dagmar.
Hello, Dogma. Oh, Ben.
Hi, Dagmar.
It really was Auf Wiedersehen, pet, as everyone went their separate ways. Clement and Frenais contributed to the Bond movie Never Say Never Again, in which Pat Roach appeared, and he played another heavy in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. As Sergeant Fletcher in Miss Marple, A Murder is announced, Kevin Waitley set about carving himself a career as a screen cop. Renaissance man Jimmy Nail flexed his comedy muscles in Blot on the Landscape, and again with his version of Love Don't Live Here Anymore. Gary Holton rehashed his lovable Cockney rogue in a series of Tennant's TV commercials.
He beat that Tintin Esperan.
You what?
He says it's got a very different and satisfying taste. Isn't that right, mate?
And by 1985 they were reunited as the second series went into production. But since the story was no longer set in Germany, a new set of circumstances had to be found for bringing them back together.
Each one of us knows that if the chips were down during Dire Straits life, all we'd have to do is to send out an SOS and the others would come running.
The whole point about Germany was you didn't have to contrive anything. Now, in Series 2, you had to create a reason why this particular disparate group, it would be rather like a platoon in the army, getting back together again in civilian life. And, you know, however clever you are, it was contrived, and we had to contrive it.
But say out something.
You ever want to get this place finished?
You better look your mates up again.
It soon became clear that Part 2 of Auf Wiedersehen, Pet wouldn't run as smoothly as Part 1.
Central TV had been forced to move from Elstree Studios up to Lenton Lane in Nottingham because their franchise was in the Midlands. And there were a lot of technicians that just didn't want to move. You know, they were Londoners and they didn't want to be in Nottingham, so there was a lot of bad feeling there and a lot of juggling between the management and the unions going on. It's a bit restricting in other areas, isn't it?
Honestly, you're so old-fashioned in some ways, Never. I mean, I know they're in the next room, but you don't have to run both bath taps every time we make love. We'd be acting away and doing our thing, and all of a sudden the lights would go out, and they'd say, right, well, we're off then, I'll see you tomorrow. And we'd go, right, that's it then?
And it wasn't just the crew who were playing up, the cast were too. A former new boy had become an old master.
By then, Jimmy now had become an absolute torture, yeah. He was really difficult. He thought he knew a lot about filming. He thought he knew a lot about the shots, about how the angles. He thought he knew a lot about the script. He thought he wanted to rewrite his part. He was an all-round arsehole, yeah, he really was.
Jimmy was a bit unhappy at times, and I seemed to take the brunt of it. But, you know, in the end, what he was unhappy with, it was his gut instinct was this was not as real as the first one. And you can't really argue with that.
The antics of the Auf Wiedersehen pet lads in Spain were meat and drink to the British press, and the tabloids took a particular interest in the excesses of Gary Holton.
Past midday, he couldn't remember his lines, I found. And I was doing scenes with him, and we were doing 12 takes. on the scene because he couldn't remember my character's name.
Oh, hello, Brent.
Hello, Wayne. You all on your own?
Then on the 25th of October 1985, they got their biggest Gary Holton story, the one to end them all.
My brother rang me on Friday morning and said, have you heard the news? And I said, no, what? And he said, well, Gary's dead. And I said, well, that's not possible. I was working with him on Wednesday, and he was fine. He said, no, he's been found dead. Shock, utter shock. And I ran out, bought the newspapers, and it was headline.
Every time I think of it. He was just a young lad, you know. He was a wonderful part of the team, and a very, very, very sad thing to happen. And I remember we had to just carry on filming, you know, as if that's the ruthlessness of this business, the fact that we hadn't finished the show when he died. So we basically given 2 days off, I think, then we had to come back and pretend he was still there. That was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life, really. God bless him.
He was one of the Magnificent Seven. It was very difficult. We didn't know what we were going to do.
I was driving home thinking, you know, what we're going to do the next 3 months. There's no question of any more filming. And by the time I got home, they were already on the phone to say, you're in on Monday, and we think we can save the series, and they'd rewritten it very fast.
We had to write him out of 1 or 2 scenes, and even had to shoot a few shots with a double for Wayne, so that we could complete scenes that he'd begun.
Remember though, Wayne and him back on the monitor, saying, oh well, there, yeah, that's where Gary is, look there. This is 2 days after the poor guy died, you know, and we had to just pretend he was still there, so it was quite a horrific thing to have to do.
So now we're going to film the interiors, knowing that in the exteriors we've got a dead actor. And we carried on, but if you watch the show, there's always someone saying,
where's Wayne? You're making a pathetic attempt to chat up the receptionist.
There was always this nightmare of having to find a way of getting Wayne out of the picture before we did the interiors.
I'll go and wake Wayne up. He's interested, I'll get a higher corporation with his head in.
In terms of when someone dies, it does sort of take the edge off the show, yeah.
After such a tough end to the series, it wouldn't have been a surprise if the team had banished Auf Wiedersehen, not to mention Hasta la Vista, from their phrase books, but they still got together occasionally. Tim Healy and Jimmy Nail worked together briefly on Educating Oz, a one-off public information film where Dennis tries to teach Oz the facts about AIDS.
The AIDS affects everybody, right? Everybody who has sex.
Maybe he's in America, but not on Tyneside, man.
And returning to his performing roots, Jimmy reached #1 in the charts in 1991. And in the same year came Spender, Jimmy's own series about an undercover cop from Tyneside, which gave him a chance to twist Ian La Frenais' arm into writing for him.
Jimmy and I become friends, and you know, he said to me one day, why don't we do something together?
This is not a good start, Spender.
If I'm under wraps, I don't want the local plods to know who I am, okay? Never mind the local villains.
Pat Roach carried on wrestling and in 1991 became European heavyweight champion. And he continued throwing his weight around in the cinema, teaming up with Michael Sheard in the final Indiana Jones film. Tim Healy returned to the stage and also played Dustman Foxy alongside Edward Woodward in Common as Muck.
And the rest. There's no there, man. You spilt it. Now you sweep it up, otherwise I'm on the phone to your boss. Listen, missus, if you want the street clean, you do it. You've got the broom, and when you're at it, why don't you wrap yourself around your steer on a couple of times? You're a miserable old witch, man.
In 1993, Timothy Spall got his own series, Frank Stubbs Promotes, and Chris Fairbank got jobs on everyone else's series.
Cheers, Joe.
My name's not Joe, it's John.
While Kevin Whately established himself as another national favourite, the uber sidekick Sergeant Lewis in Inspector Morse, the Wits End hit factory churned out another success in Lovejoy, adapted by Ian La Frenais and starring Ian McShane as the antique-dealing babe magnate.
To some people, it's women that come first. To others, money, ambition, survival. For me, antiques.
As for the original ideas man, Frank Rodham's projects included War Party, a movie set on a Native American reservation, and he proved his versatility by creating the TV cookery show MasterChef. In 2000, Tim Healy and Jimmy Nail got the gang back together in Newcastle for a tribute to the late actor Sammy Johnson, who played Jimmy's mate Stick in Spender. Concert for Sammy reunited most of the Geordie Mafia, and Dick Clement and Ian La Frenais were persuaded to write some one-off Auf Wiedersehen pet sketches.
It was the first time we played these characters live, and we got this reaction like you wouldn't believe. The place went mad when we came on as Dennis Oz and Neville.
I'd written to Dick and Ian, who were over in the States. They hadn't seen the show, to say thanks for the scripts. I wish you'd seen it. And Jimmy had flown out there and was staying with Ian at the time, and Tim Spall was out there making a movie, and they had a dinner with Frank Rodham.
Frank and Jimmy had been sitting down and doing quite a lot of work on this, and they'd come up with the basic idea of the Middlesbrough Transporter Bridge.
Designed by the Cleveland Bridge and Engineering Company of Darlington. What's our next stop? Guided tour of the Haverton Hill Glue Factory.
I had the idea of them taking the bridge and taking it to Arizona so that you could get access to a casino.
The moment they said that, you know, it worked. They got my juices going, and they must have got yours going too, because suddenly it felt like an idea that was outrageous enough and big enough to make an impact.
It's gargantuan. It's outrageous. That's the point.
I was very, very annoyed about it. I didn't want to see that show 15 years later resurrected with the guys all as a gang on some cockamamie scheme to put up a bridge somewhere. It made no sense.
But the third series went ahead all the same. The rights had reverted back to Frank Rodham, and he took it straight to the BBC, who could smell a popular hit.
We said at the time, we said, if we're going to do it, let's make it even better than the first series. I liked it very much, and the fact that it connected with an audience was enormously gratifying.
You're becoming a right expert on Indian folklore, aren't you, Bum?
It's natural, isn't it? Come to a strange place, absorb the culture.
Oh, yeah. When we were in Germany, I don't remember you boning up on Beethoven.
I said to Dick and Ian not to do the show, and if they were going to do the show, to not call it Auf Wiedersehen Pet.
Despite McEwan's disgruntlement, a fourth series followed, set in another unlikely location, Cuba. The result being that a long-standing friendship was broken over a TV programme.
I don't speak to Dick and Ian over him. And Ian's my best friend, and I love Ian. He was the best man at my wedding, and I've not spoken to Ian since.
Besides producing his wife Tracy Ullman's TV shows, Alan McEwan has turned his attention to stage musicals, achieving success and acclaim with Jerry Springer, The Opera. Pat Roach sadly died of cancer in 2004. Tim Healy has played to ecstatic audiences as Billy's dad in Billy Elliot the Musical. Timothy Spall is just about recognisable in the Harry Potter and Lemony Snicket movies. Jimmy Nail has been voicing Tesco adverts, and writers Clement and La Frenais recently adapted Jonathan Coe's The Rotters Club for TV featuring Chris Fairbank. But it was the original series of Auf Wiedersehen Pet that laid the foundations on which these towering careers were built and provided the bricks and mortar for much of that success.
It's a young man's game, Bill. Soon we'll start look like pensioners abroad, you know what I mean?
We had some busting times out, didn't we?
No.
Without doubt, the genius lay in the writing.
They're all just guys to me, you know, they're all like brothers.
It's like a band of brothers. It sounds a cliche, but it was true in our case. We all love each other.
You baldy old git!
Well, I loved it, darling. I could go on all day, but we have had to narrow it down because, ladies and gentlemen, there's a guy at the back who already has the scissors out, and he's going to cut.
And Michael Sheard, who played Herr Grummold in the first series, died last week.